I'm supporting my friend and colleague Steve Tuckwell, who is our candidate to replace Boris Johnson in the Uxbridge and South Ruislip by-election.
Are you taking time out from the debate? Are you going to be speaking later?
I'm on the campaign trail. As we know today, we're not expecting that there will be a vote because there is cross-party agreement on this. So normally in Parliament, most things are passed without there being a division, so a requirement for each individual MP to register their vote, because there is cross-party agreement. So we still don't know. Later on, I may have to go in if there is going to be a division, but at the moment, I'm supporting my friend and colleague Steve Tuckwell, who is our candidate to replace Boris Johnson in the Uxbridge and South Ruislip by-election.
So if there is a vote, and there may well not be one now, because so many of your fellow Conservative MPs, David, are saying they intend to abstain. It may go through without any vote whatsoever, but you'll be there if there is a vote. Rishi Sunak said earlier on, or made it clear earlier on, he was not preparing or contemplating voting. What do you think of that? I mean, is that leadership? There are standards and to be upheld here. And the Prime Minister came into office, didn't he, saying he was going to bring in a new era of higher standards, and not taking part in a vote like this. Does that undermine that point?
The vote itself and the report itself are a matter for Parliament. As he said, they were set up under a previous Prime Minister, and there is cross-party acceptance of the findings. So I know there'll be those who want to argue that they should be more harsh, those who argue they should be less harsh. But nobody's brought forward any amendments to that. So there is no reason for a vote to take place. And clearly, if you are the Prime Minister, if you're a backbench member of Parliament like me, you've got to balance whether it's worth being in the room when the decision's made, or whether there are other things that are important that you've committed to. And clearly, the Prime Minister knows he's got a visiting Prime Minister of another country. Yeah. There's an issue of international trade. There's what's going on with Ukraine. Is the most important thing to go and do something for the look of it when everybody agrees it's the right thing to do anyway? Yeah. Or is the most important thing to do to be focusing on doing your job and pursuing the needs of the country?
Well, except David, sure, but except David, that not everyone does agree with that. I've been hearing a number of voices over the weekend and before of members on your side arguing that the report is too harsh. I mean, I heard Michael Gove argue it was too harsh, and that was the reason he was not voting, not because he thought it was going to go through and it was all hunky dory. He didn't like the report, so he's not going to vote for it. And there are many other members who are not going to vote for their own reasons, as you know, as we all do, David. Some of them are just worried about the opinion in their local parties, where there are sort of pockets of support for Boris Johnson. So is that mass abstention against that contention? Is that mass abstention a good look, do you think?
Well, I think people are damned if they do it and damned if they don't. I think it's very clear, given that there is a cross-party view and a consensus, that the committee has done its job exactly as it was tasked to by Parliament. The report itself is very short, it's very factual, it's to the point. There's not really much in the way of arguing with its conclusions, and whilst there is room for anybody who thinks that the sanctions are too harsh or are too lenient to have brought forward amendments in the vote tonight. Nobody has done that. So that indicates that there is that broad sense of consensus. And I think many of us will look at it and say, well, if there is agreement, then we should just agree and get on with it. We need to be able to accept that the committee's done the right thing without spending, frankly, a lot of time seeking to create divisions where, in fact, there's a widespread sense of agreement.
Yeah, I mean, is it your view, then, that the sanctions and the entirety of this report and its recommendations are justified? You would support them as they stand. You agree with the idea. Boris Johnson's resigned, so it's academic in that sense. But a 90-day suspension, was that appropriate for the crime of lying and lying repeatedly, in your view, David?
Well, clearly, that is the view of the committee. And when
no, but it's your question. It's a question for you now, because ultimately it's for the House of Commons. So I'm asking you for your opinion as an individual member of Parliament.
And as somebody who's done disciplinary investigations myself, somebody who used to be a magistrate serving my constituency in the past, it seems to me the evidence and the sanction are very well balanced against each other. And of course, Margaret Ferrier, I was present in Parliament, although I didn't vote on that particular matter, but it seemed to me that there was, again, a high degree of cross-party agreement about the appropriate way forward. We accepted the recommendations of the committee that looked into that. And I think that was the right thing to do. This is not something where, frankly, people should be seeking party political advantage by arguing about who did or didn't vote and why, what the reasons of that were, especially when, we're sitting here, everybody, given today, certainly for the Conservative Party, is a one-line whip. People have accepted commitments in their constituency. Yeah. They're out campaigning in by-elections. They're out meeting constituents, meeting businesses, getting on with their jobs. To have a degree of uncertainty because we simply don't know whether any of the opposition parties are seeking to force a vote on a matter where they know there is no need for a vote because there is cross-party agreement.
Yeah.
It's clear that there's some political game playing here, and frankly, I think the Prime Minister is right not to play that. And I find it enormously frustrating that even at this stage, where I've got campaigns to do, I've got good colleagues to support that deserve to be elected in this by-election, that we're facing a situation where other people's game playing is a distraction. We need to accept the report. Parliament needs to put it through on the nod. As you said, it is largely academic, the issue of the sanctions, because Boris Johnson has resigned rather than put that issue to the vote in a by-election. Parliament needs to accept this is an unedifying episode. The committee has laid out all the evidence for the whole world, all of the public to see. Let's simply agree that and get on with the interests of the country.
Okay, now I keep hearing people saying, when it comes to Boris Johnson, the question, will he ever come back onto the political stage? Never say never. I wonder, in your case, do you say never again to the idea of a Boris Johnson comeback?
Well, look, we believe in forgiveness as well, but clearly, there's no question when you read this report that the scale of the issues that led to his resignation and ultimately to the sanction that's being recommended are very serious indeed. And clearly, at the moment, we're in the heat of what has been made into something of a political debate. But it isn't really a political debate. It's a matter of right and wrong and due process. And in my view, it's very unlikely that we would see a Boris Johnson come back.
Well, in my view, it's
in
very...
the longer term, we may in the long term see him play, some role in public life. Who's to say? He might be the editor of a newspaper. The media perhaps more forgiving than Parliament when it comes to people who've done some of these things. But we'll see that in the long term. But I don't see any appetite amongst colleagues to spend any more time on this drama. We recognise that there's a lot of work to be done in the interest of the country, and that's what we need to be focused on.